With Assassins and Rangers back at the top of the TFT meta, this beefy counter strategy shuts them right down to an icy halt. 6 Glacials is the perfect way to stunlock your opponents and grind up through the ranks. With recent buffs to Ezreal and the items that Olaf typically wants to carry, Glacials are back on the menu. Even Ornn has gotten a big buff to help out our early game lineup. With 6 Glacials, every one of our auto attacks has a 50% chance to stun, and we're going to add in a few extra tricks on top of that to splash those stuns out even more often. Okay, so let's jump right into some of the more technical aspects of putting this all together. But first, I'd like to remind you to click on the link in the description below, and take a look at the updated ProGuides.com. If you want to learn more about teamfight tactics, ProGuides will always have info on the newest patches, best builds, and strategies. There are all kinds of different resources available from top players to help you be the best player that you can be, including access to coaching, so make sure to check out ProGuides.com using the link in the description underneath this video. This build works best as a team, so grouping your front line together to splash out stuns and electric procs will go a long way. Similarly, items like Zeeks or Lockets will give us a very useful source of stats to our otherwise weaker units. With this strategy, long fights are your friend, and since we aren't building big damage threats, we do want to drag things out a little bit longer. This build is strong against Woodlands, Wardens, and Assassins, since the stunlock and grindy playstyle shuts them down entirely. Infernos are a threat, since they can burst and do damage over time that can come through even if stunned. And in general, this Glacials build is weakest against magic comps. Ocean Mages are probably our toughest threat if they eliminate our key units with burst very early in the round. To protect against this, as always, scout the lobby and add in extra magic resistance items on your carries if there's a strong opponent running mages. Otherwise, Glacials are a fairly straightforward playstyle and relatively easy to play as well. Just set up your beefy front line and then work towards key items. With the changes in patch 10.2 giving big buffs to most of the important items in this build, let's quickly recap the numbers to better understand the effects. So as mentioned in the intro, a whole slew of items that the Glacial units love to hold onto got pretty significant buffs. Olaf's Bloodthirster lifesteal got buffed recently from 40% to 50%, helping him to stay alive even longer and work to scale up his attack speed. And to perfectly complement that last point, Winsu's Rageblade also got buffed from gaining 4% attack speed per stack to 5%, which hashes out to both items getting their stats boosted by 20%. Since Glacials spit out extra stuns with more attack speed, this is a huge bonus for Olaf in this build. Since stuns are more consistent, he's even super powerful at just 1 star, and he's not dependent on hitting 2 star deep in the late game as he is with most other Berserker builds. And that's not all for items. Iceborne Gauntlet's freeze duration got buffed from 1.5 seconds to 2.5 seconds, and remember that this item procs after its holder uses their spell, and it stuns on the very next auto attack. This makes it a perfect item to place on Ezreal, who spits out the most spells out of anybody else in this build. Bramble Vest's damage was buffed slightly to the benefit of our tanks in the front line, and Hextech Gunblade's lifesteal is also up from 25% to 33%, making it a pretty decent choice now for a brawler like Warwick. Either Warwick or Volibear both benefit from ability power in the very early game, and if you happen to find an early Ezreal to go with Ornn, you'll notice tons of extra damage if he's holding a critical strike glove. As a quick heads up, hitting 6 Glacials does require finding a spatula, so make sure to keep an eye out for one whenever you can. You'll be turning it into a frozen mallet, so you'll also need to hold onto a giant's belt in the meantime. The other way to get to 6 Glacials is of course to find a Glacial Lux, but since that's quite rare and it won't be available until deep in the late game, we'll focus on the frozen mallet for now. There are 2 options for the early game, either Predators with Warwick, or to just go directly into the Glacial Electric Warden's path with Volibear and Ornn. The Predator's path will revolve more around stacking up an early game Warwick and looking to win streak with the execute damage from the Pred's passive bonus. This is typically the safer early game strategy, but it also costs a bit more because we'll be stacking up units on our bench instead of banking gold econ for that extra income. The Electric Warden's path has a pretty natural flow into where our mid-game build wants to be. This build has Volibear and Ornn for Electric, Braum for the second Warden and also a Glacial, and then of course Warwick and Ezreal as we find them and upgrade them too. The initial early game build and items are shown here using the new Team Builder tool from ProGuides.com. As an overview of our final build, we'll be aiming for all 5 Glacials with Olaf as our main carry. On top of that, a third Berserker of your choice who ideally will be holding the Frozen Mallet, and then Ornn to give us the Warden's bonus and also the Electric bonus with Volibear and eventually Zed at level 8. Items at this point are very important, so make sure to have your game plan set and scheduled right from carousel number 1. Grab the key items right away. In this case, it's components towards Frozen Mallet, or for your next Olaf item, typically Bloodthirster or Gwinsu's. At levels 6 and 7, a key to higher placements and first place finishes is to blend in a third Berserker to go along with Olaf and Volibear, which gives a nice burst of extra splash damage, which really goes a long way towards getting Olaf up to that full late game carry mode, since his Bloodthirster and crits can also splash onto multiple enemies, keeping him alive for that much longer. This is about the point in the game where you'll look to turn your spatula into that frozen mallet, and a great option is to throw it on the third Berserker. I like Sion here for the extra crowd control and AoE stun, but Jax or Mundo are fine options too. At level 7, and as Olaf really starts to scale, you'll notice a pretty large power spike. Some important mechanical details to remember are that with 3 Berserkers, the Glacial Stun can also splash, which is why building Frozen Mallet on a Berserker is often best. Great additional items are Swordbreaker for the same reason, since it can splash also, and with this build, you'll have your opponent's team stunned for about half the round. Swordbreaker can keep them shut down for the other half as well, making for extremely easy wins. Keep your gold income high through these rounds, and just roll occasionally to upgrade pairs to 2 stars. Olaf level 2 is a big deal, but it isn't worth blowing all your income on. Getting to level 8 gives us much better odds of finding Zed, who will give us our final passive bonus at 3 electric. The electric bonus is quite large at 250 damage every time a nearby enemy deals or receives a critical strike. Another big reason to grab a third Berserker in this build is that crits can also splash. So, since Ornn's spell increases the odds of an enemy getting crit, and since we usually try to get a late Infinity Edge on Olaf, crits, stuns, and electric passives will be splashing all over the board, dealing tons of damage. In the very late game, as you move towards top 2 or level 9, the last moves to think about will be adding in an Electric Lux, which is the only way we can get to 4 electrics. This gives another huge spike in passive damage, though finding her is somewhat rare. And obviously, if you weren't able to finish Frozen Mallet, look to hit 6 Glacials with Lux, which boosts your stun rate up to 50%. If you did get your spatula for 6 Glacials and you also find a Glacial Lux, you have a really interesting option provided you can work quickly. This will free up 2 extra spots for you. The Warwick and your next weakest Glacial can come off the field in exchange for 2 more Wardens, giving you one last big boost in frontline defensiveness. Remember though that the trade-off here is for the 2 Glacial units, who will be putting out stuns on 50% of their auto attacks. So the 2 new Wardens should almost always be Malphite and Amumu if you're going to do this, since they put out so much crowd control and stuns themselves. Either way, that's a great issue to run into as it means you're way ahead of the field. Remember to scout out your final opponent's board for Zephyrs and other threats to ensure that you move closer to that first place finish. In this gameplay footage, you can see our Icy team fully stun-locking the opponent's board, with Olaf splashing out crowd control and damage as his attack speed scales up. Unless our opponents planned for us far in advance and brought a whole bunch of Quicksilvers, they've just got no chance as we slide in for a cool first place finish. Try this out for yourself and let us know your results in the comments below, and make sure to check back right here on the ProGuides.com Teamfight Tactics channel for the newest guides in patch 10.2. Make sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube, where you can always find tons of great resources from top players to help you be the best player that you can be, including access to coaching, so make sure to check out ProGuides.com using the link in the description below. Again, I'm Vincent Grand. Cheers, and we'll see you next time.